Hi, Jamie with you again. I hope you're very well indeed. Well, thank you for joining me on Talking Sonics. Now, analog versus digital. Is it a relevant conversation now that digital devices and digital audio workstations are so fantastic these days? Well, maybe not, but back in the 90s, I can recall that it was a big question. Should people be working on digital devices, or should they stick with analog? And what does analog sound like? What's the difference? For many of you growing up now, recording music, if you're a young or youngish musician, I'm sure you're working with digital audio workstations, recording to computer, as most people and most professionals now are doing so. But some love analog. Now, how do I explain, the differences? Well, it's a pretty complicated thing. And I started recording way back when I was 12 years old with analog machines, so I guess I can explain a little bit about the difference throughout my 30 years or so of recording music. So stay tuned to the end of this video where I will do some A/B testing of some drum stems and some music mixes I've been working on. Actually A/Bing the digital source with going to a 1/4-inch TIAC analog tape machine, and you can hear the difference. I'm going to switch in and out between the digital source and the analog source a little later on. So let's get started talking about the age-old question for recording engineers these days: what's better, analog or digital? So I started recording music when I was about 12 years old, and my birthday present for a 12-year-old guitar player was a Tascam Porta 1 mini recording studio. And while I was not writing songs at that time, I did have some friends come up to my father's farm, and we had a bungalow or a small cabin on the farm where I produced an album of songs for a band called In Transit from Melbourne, which was essentially a duo, a two-piece guitar or a guitarist and a singer. We had no drummers, no bass, but we did have a little Roland Drummatix drum machine, which I managed to roughly program. It wasn't very elegant, but it was something that I learned to start recording on. And it was, really just the basics for me at that point. A little bit of EQ going to the tape, learning how to switch in and out 1, 2, 3, 4 tracks, overdubbing. A little bit of bouncing was done, a little bit of submixing of those bounces. So that was a starting point for me, and quite an enjoyable one. And the result of that recording was getting airplay on Melbourne's 3RRR, which is a famed and fantastic station, on their program Demo Derby. Now, I'm not sure if the fact that we sent them boxes of chocolates and I think toy dinosaurs as a bit of a gift, but nonetheless they played the In Transit demos, and they were kind of good songs. So they were older guys that wrote these songs, and I was a 12-year-old engineer. That was my first production. So there you go, first go, and I was on the radio. Incidentally, that Drummatix drum machine joined me and my high school band as we didn't have a drummer. So it was roughly programmed again, just with some basic beats to back songs like Sunshine of Your Love that we played by Cream, the old classic. And we'd play some gigs just at lunchtime in the school hall, to which, upon playing this brilliant Cream song one day, the machine decided to go haywire and play at double speed. So I remember sort of stomping on the floor like this, whacking this thing, trying to kill it because it had destroyed our performance. Not that it was very good anyway, but it was a starting point. But yeah, that was my early days of playing with drum machines and producing. So by the time I was 16, I progressed a little bit with my band Degenerates. We were a rock band. We played some covers, and we played at 21st birthdays and 18th birthdays when I was still at high school. But we managed to find some songwriting partners and produce a couple of songs at Melbourne's Sing Sing Studios, and that was my first opportunity to play with one of these things. And it's a huge, heavy reel Ampex 456, which, as you can imagine, is expensive, and that's 2-inch 24-track tape that we were recording to. Lovely quality, good mic preamps, good microphones, and that was very early days experience. Although we didn't quite know how to pull good sounds, but it was expensive. I mean, these things we're talking about $250 a reel, something like that, and we probably needed several reels. So an expensive process, but that was some of the first tastes I had of using analog recording in a more professional sense, and trying to fill up that multi-track and really layering up individual drum microphones, double track guitars, adding lead parts, chorus harmonies, and doing drop-ins on tapes where you drop in and out of a line, or if there's a mistake made, you can play the tape back and quickly drop into record and drop out of record, or the engineer would be assisting doing that. So that was the first sort of taste for me at the age of 17. And then luckily that progressed to getting a signing with EMI Records, or EMI Chrysalis. So my band Degenerates in about 1990 was signed to EMI, and of course with EMI having their famous Studios 301 complex in Castlereagh Street, Sydney at the time, we went to record with Kevin Caveman Shirley producing us, and Kevin has of course gone on to do a whole lot of amazing things shortly after us, working with the Australian band Baby Animals, but he also has gone through and worked with Divinals and Led Zeppelin, Iron Maiden, a whole lot of things. So Kevin, if you're watching, I hope you're well, I hope you're healthy. And yeah, we had a good experience there, a fun experience, and that was recording to a 32-track digital machine made by Mitsubishi. Now this was still early days for digital recording, but these were really high-spec machines, high-quality AD converters, and really it was a seamless thing. And what I noticed about that is that the dropping in could be absolutely seamless. In fact, we would be overdubbing guitar tracks, comping vocals very easily with the transport machine, still working in a way like an analog 24-track machine, but the drop-ins were just so perfect and crisp, and there was just no glitches or no problems. So that was an interesting experience. So of course, a very expensive machine at the time, and probably leagues ahead of where Pro Tools and digital audio workstations were at the time in the early 90s. Probably one of the better machines at the time. So back at 301, we were recording to digital, 32-track, and then mastering or mixing onto DAT. So if you haven't seen one of these things before, there you go, that's a little DAT, digital audio tape. And these things were quite reliable. Occasionally you might get a dropout if this tape was stretched in it, but really quite reliable. And these have been great to use. I remember really enjoying sticking on the headphones in the studio and selecting track 1 and 2, and the tape would reel through very, very quickly and line up to the next sequence or the next marker point on the DAT tape to play the next mix. So I could A/B and listen very quickly to some of the work we'd done. So they were a pretty cool thing, but once we'd gone from DAT and finished our recordings, then there would be the mastering session either with Bob Ludwig in Master Disc in New York at the time, or with Don Bartley at 301. And Don would take the DAT, go through his EMI console, and then bounce that back to an analog tape machine, which would add this silkiness. And that's a really interesting thing about tape, is you would notice this silkiness. So our DAT would go through the console, it would have some EQ and compression adjustments, then it would go to tape, and then back through an apogee converter back into the digital world. In fact, this is the actual device that Don Bartley was using at the time, and this was great, and this was really a beautiful thing at the time because of its soft limit function. This is an apogee, not sure what model it is, an AD1 or something like that, but predominantly only a 44.1 kilohertz AD converter, which was fine because we were mastering for CD at the time. So that's where we were at back in the early 90s. By about 1993, I'd moved on, no longer working with EMI. I built my own studio in country Victoria called the Boathouse and acquired an Akai 1214 12-channel mixer and tape transport machine all in the one kind of unit. And it used these things, which were a little bit like Betamax format. It was an analog tape machine. I recall the preamps in the Akai to be quite harsh and brittle. The EQ was usable, lots of notchable frequencies, but not particularly warm sounding. I really had to battle to get good rock recordings at the time. I was producing bands like Spudgun, Incursion, Killing Hardy on the label, and they all had radio play on Triple J. So we managed to get there with this format, but it was quite a battle. Fortunately, a little later on, I managed to get hold of a Neve console that came from GTV9 Studios in Melbourne. Have a look at my Gear Detective video if you want to learn more about that. And look, the real proof in the pudding with the Akai machine at the time was that I decided to patch the Neve mic preamplifiers directly tape into the Akai. And this actually fared pretty well. The format was quite smooth. Although the real negative about this format, and it was well known, is that the tape would just shred. They were not very well produced products, and you would have this black gunk on the tape head after so many passes. So I remember having cotton swabs and isopropyl alcohol to constantly clean, and constantly cleaning the tape rollers with little soapy water. So it was a constant maintenance job. So there's always maintenance with analog tape machines, but this thing was not pretty. But it was great to try it with the Neve console and start to hear some real magic happen. By about the mid-90s or thereabouts, don't hold me to that, but ADATs had become popular, and these were these 8-track tape machines which were, I guess, a VHS or a VHS-C format, and made famous by Alanis Morissette for her Jagged Little Pill album, which I believe was also produced through a Mackie console. So these low noise, beautiful silky EQ'd sounding, very lightweight professional mixers came onto the market in the early to mid 90s. So it really changed the game. Now, I produced a couple of albums on a Mackie console with ADATs, and was there a negative with ADATs? Well, we had all the positives of being able to easily drop in and record multiple tracks, but because it was tape still, even though it was digital, it was recording to a tape transport, there would be dropouts, and there were some nightmares that happened where some great recordings just became destroyed. So I very quickly learned that I had to back up by doing dubs of the ADATs to another tape set in case I got dropouts or a stretched tape. So for me, I never decided to buy ADAT. I didn't like it so much. I loved the Mackie mixers, and it was in other studios that I did produce a couple of albums and singles using ADATs and Mackie mixers. But no, ADAT, no. I think the only thing good about the format was the development of the ADAT light pipe, which could send digital audio literally through an optical fibre cable. So for me, next step, I was looking for something to progress me past analog tape. Where do I go with digital? What was more affordable? And the answer for me at the time was Fostex. And look, there were many people or many companies producing digital hard drive recorders. This is a front panel or a control or transport faceplate to my Fostex D160. There was also a 24-channel version of these, which were black coloured. But yeah, jog wheel where you could easily scrub back and forward. The advantage of this guy is you could do loop functions, you could do easily drop in and out things, easily access things. It was a really great tape mechanism. And for me, it felt like I was in the analog world. It's like a tape transport from a 24-track machine. So a little bit more user-friendly and so on, and a little bit more complex in terms of being able to step through and select tracks and create loop functions and locate time segments and select the tracks that you are recording. So Fostex was a very affordable option, although was it great? I would say no, it was horrible. And it was horrible because the mic preamps in the Fostex units were quite brittle. So I had this problem again. At the point I had a Neve console. It was beautiful. I had some great Neumann microphones. I had some 1178 compressor limiters. So I had all the good front end and some good drums and guitars and other things to record, but the Fostex really let me down. Interesting, it was also light pipe. So it had that functionality of being able to put other converters into it. So I started experimenting and learning about other converters, which, as you can see behind me, I've got some RME converters there and Apogee. We've got another Apogee lower down. You can't see it in this video screenshot. But for me, the next step was going to have a look at, well, you know, let's dive into that world of digital audio workstations. So there is another video I have produced about my digital audio workstation. Check that out because it's all about the RME Hammerfall card and why I chose to go down the PC route rather than Apple and Pro Tools or another device. But you know, look, incidentally, we're talking about the late 90s, and by the late 90s, there were all sorts of things on the market. Of course, there was the ADATs, there were these things, the DA88s. Well, this is a tape of a Tascam DA88, which used the high 8 format. So that was one possibility. There was radar, there were the Pro Tools 888s, and yeah, a whole host of other digital devices for recording. I successfully enjoyed going down the RME path and using their famous Digi96 Hammerfall card, and it's still working incredibly well. More than 20 years later, I'm tracking to it now, or tracking my voice to this now. It's been a real fantastic workhorse. So I'm enjoying recording through the RME converters, which are very smooth, very transparent. But if I want to get something more of a tape saturated effect, I can use the Apogees, which have the soft limit effect, which is just a little nuance, a little bit of a change, and I love the sound of that. Probably goes back to the 301 days. But I'm enjoying at the moment bouncing some drum subs or some drum tracks or mix elements to analog tape. And I'd like to show you what that's all about because there's a silkiness and there can be a sort of a gluing effect of what analog 1/4 inch tape can do. So here we go, have a listen to this now. Okay, here we are with this TAC A23000S. I've got this rolling. What I'm going to do here is monitor the repro head like this. If I switch this in, so you're listening off tape. If I switch it down, we're listening to the digital source. This is a backing track of a new song I've recorded called Different World. Have a listen to this for a little bit. So I'll let it play. This is the digital. Switching in. Can you hear that top end, the silkiness? It's driving pretty hard into the red too. Back to the digital source. Okay, we're still in digital. I'm going to switch to analog. There seems to be an airiness that lifts with the top end. Almost like a three-dimensional depth comes into the sound, which I quite like. It's quite amazing. Back to digital source. So there you have it. That is quite amazing. Okay, so now we're listening to some drums. Digital source at present. We're switching to tape. There. Geez, it really smooths out those cymbals. Silky. Back to the digital source. So there you go, that's my take on using the analog tape machine for bouncing and playing around with audio. But, you know, back to the question, what's better, analog versus digital? Well, I think now we've kind of got to the point where digital is so good and so advanced, even the audio in your laptop computer is so advanced that you've got smooth audio AD converters. There's the technology and the speed of processing to record 24-bit audio without much of a problem, really. There's so many great devices on the marketplace. The world is your oyster. So I would say, yes, digital audio is a fantastic thing, but you know, analog is now really about a sound or an effect. I think that's where it can be considered, is the silkiness or the tape saturation or tape compression is an effect. And of course, digital engineers are creating plugins to do all of these things as well. So yeah, tape has become more of an effect. Analog has got that nice silkiness, that richness, and digital now is either transparent unless the converters have a function in it to colour the sounds, but ultimately the technology is certainly there. So I think digital has it in terms of, yes, it's a great thing now that we can all use, and it's very cost effective. You don't need to go and buy these hideously expensive 24-track 2-inch analog tapes or maintain huge machines like the old Ampex machines. So there you go. That's my take. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to hear more, you want to keep up to date with Talking Sonics, so please subscribe, tap the bell, and the next video, when it comes, will arrive. You'll get a message, a little buzz or a little tap on the shoulder. Your device will tell you when I'm back here with you again. So thank you for joining me on Talking Sonics. I hope to see you real soon. Take care. Bye now.